Are you an entrepreneur or ready to become a boss? Welcome to Hawaii Boss, the business podcast made in Hawaii, where you will hear from island movers and shakers on who they are and their impact on our state. And now, step into the office of your host for Hawaii Boss, David Pettijohn.
Aloha, Hawaii Boss podcast crew listening in out there, wherever you like to listen in or watch in. Today we've got a special guest. We're going to the boss's office, which we always do. We're trying to find out how to get through here in Hawaii business, but also the folks that make the world go around, the people that work in business, but there's always sometimes some challenges with health. And there's a great organization that we came upon with Jerry Boster as the executive director of the Hawaii Parkinsons Association. And Jerry, aloha and welcome.
Aloha. Welcome to my holiday for the Center of the Parkinson's World here in Hawaii.
Yeah, and so some people, there's all these different, it's a not-for-profit organization, which as you strive to provide a certain message out to the people. There's all these different organizations and different things, cancer and different stuff. But Parkinson's is a special disease that impacts people in a very special way and very dramatically. Tell us a little bit about maybe your story and how you got involved with the Parkinson's Association.
First, I'll say Parkinson's itself is gaining a lot of name recognition. We're the fastest growing neurodegenerative condition in the United States, according to the CDC, the second largest behind Alzheimer's. And they are projecting, another 25, 30 years, we will overtake Alzheimer's. So it is unfortunately becoming a household name.
Well, that's quite sort of startling, I think. People don't see that. Dementia and Alzheimer's is already a major impact in the enough. Now this is going to, sort of surpass that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that about half of Parkinson patients sometime during their journey will have a significant mental health challenge as well. So anyways, my story is pretty easy. I was, back in 2013, I was just retiring after almost a 29-year Navy career.
That's amazing. Thank you for your service. We always have to say that. I'm a veteran too, but tell you, spending a lifetime in the military is a sacrifice for you, I could just tell you, and your wife and your family. But so thank you for that.
Thank you. And so as I was retiring and looking towards retirement, you start developing symptoms, and being a typical patient, I was in complete denial. My symptoms, though, were developed a slight tremor in my left arm. I started shuffling, doing the Parkinson shuffle. I started hunch posture.
What did you first think? What was your first thought? Like you said, denial, but what do you think? Oh, I'm just a little tired.
No, I was thinking, I'm headed for retirement. I'm getting into the aloha, starting to enjoy
just chilling
island life,
a little bit, yeah.
Starting to walk a little bit slower. But my wife, who had worked at a hospice years ago in the accounting department, had been around Parkinson patients. And so she started to recognize some of the symptoms. And so she started to kick me, and I started just ignoring the kicks and ignoring her about them. So she went and enlisted a very good friend of ours, who is somebody you don't ignore. Her name's Diana, and we call her the Queen. And
she has an opinion about things.
It's not so much an opinion. She's just one of these people, by her personality, is a big, strong person, and you don't say no, you get to rub a slipper.
Right.
And so
she has meaning. Whatever she says is meaningful then. So you got to listen when she's talking to you.
Yeah, and Diana invited me to brunch for one Sunday over at the Navy Marine Corps golf course. And so we were over there, and the rest of the family was up getting some crab legs, and she looked at me and says, "You have a problem." And her husband was a Vietnam veteran, lots of Agent Orange issues, so she knew what she was talking about. And she says, "You got a problem, and you're going to go see the doctor." There was no question, and there was only one proper answer to that. The answer was, "Yes, ma'am."
Yeah.
And so I started the diagnosis.
She fellow service with you, or just a friend that you had long-time friend?
Her and her husband were probably the closest friends we had. He was more of an older brother to me. One of the first ones we met when we first came to Hawaii back in 2008.
Yeah.
And so they held a very special place with us.
Sure.
And for her to say that, it was pretty eye-opening.
Sure. But it's good to have some people like that on your side.
You got to.
Yeah.
You got to. And so in June of 2013, I started my diagnosis. I went to see my primary care manager, explained what was going on, and so she referred me to the general neurologist at Tripler, which was good. And I got really lucky. I got a good general neurologist. And she gave me a diagnosis of a half step, as I call it. She says, you have Parkinson-like symptoms. She did not give me the gut punch that is, you have
Full
Parkinson's.
blown, yeah. There's still more testing to do.
Yeah, that's why I called it that half step. And so I'm going to refer you out to a specialist. And so that gave me time while the referral was working its way through the system and getting my appointment to get into the books.
Sure.
You know, being a Navy officer, I learned how to do research, and so I started understanding why she said that. So in November of 13, went in to see Dr. Melvin Kokini, and great doc, great specialist, and he did his examination of me, and he gauged me right, and he just said, hey, you have Parkinson's, just very matter-of-factly, no beating around the bush, because he recognized the type of person I was from all my military training.
Sure. Why sugarcoat it?
Right. But his next sentence really changed the course of my Parkinson's forever.
Okay.
He says, there's a local drug trial going on you would be perfect for. Because it not only gave me a direction, but it also gives you kind of hope, because you go into drug trials, because drug trials are all the cutting edge stuff. Now, it's really kind of funny, this drug trial actually ended up being on nicotine, because at the time, people had thought that cigarette smokers had a later onset and slower progression. It's pretty much been debunked, because what it is those people die much earlier because of all the cigarette issues. So they weren't developing the full-blown Parkinson's as a lot of people that lived, 12 or 15 years longer.
Okay, so they teased out the stats and found out, that one doesn't work.
That was later on. So I immediately got in touch with that doctor and went into that drug trial. Now that did a couple things besides what I've already mentioned. It also gave me access to the doctor on a much more frequent basis than you normally see for specialists.
Sure. Well, get a lot of your questions answered, whereas before, maybe now even, to see your neurologist and then maybe months later maybe for follow-up? I don't know how if it's challenging. Yeah, about every 4 months are my normal appointments. Getting into that first appointment averages 4 to 6 months, and then following up after that. But for the first 3 months of my trial, I was seeing the specialist every 2 weeks. Because that's part of the trial in order for, they get to... Because they have to evaluate me and check my progress. And so it did a couple things. It gave me that resource to talk to him about what's going on and start understanding, and just access to the full range of things that I wouldn't have had before. Right. And that person to talk to about it, as well as dealing with drug trials. And now I've become a huge advocate for drug trials, because the stats are actually really staggering. To put one drug on the shelf takes about 12 years. Right. They have to go through 15,000 compounds to find the one that's actually going to make it on the shelf for about $350 million. And you know what the number one critical piece of that is? Volunteers. 80% of drug trials are delayed for lack of volunteers, and a full third never get off the ground. It's almost like blood donations, a similar sort of thing. There's a shortage of that because people who are willing to volunteer so basically you're a good candidate because you're a healthy Navy man and sort of lived healthily for your life, and so they say, okay, you're a good specimen for a clinical trial to see if there's any impact or not. Right. How must that feel though sometimes when you find out maybe it doesn't, the clinical trial, you're getting to see your doctor more, but then we find out maybe it doesn't work, or there's... What's the exploration like for someone who's, you're open to that, but maybe people who are just newly diagnosed, what are some of where do they go? What's their first step? The first step is a step today that we never had when I was first diagnosed. And Dr. Yu is a great guy, and he gave me 45 minutes, which for anybody that goes to see a specialist knows that's about 3 times as much as you normally get. Right. But at the end of the day, he basically gave me a brochure and a couple websites and says, that's all I have time for, go educate yourself. But what we have today is the place we're sitting in. This is our Hawaii Parkinsons Association Resource Center that we opened up just under 2 years ago. It's a place for people to come and get information on the condition and to meet other Parkinson patients and caregivers. And that's our primary mission. That's why we opened in the fall of 2020, right in the heart of the pandemic. But it's so important that we get this place open to give people a place to come to have those resources that they need. Because when you get that first gut punch of the diagnosis, the big thing is you don't know what you don't know. You don't even know enough to ask the questions. How quick is this going to progress? Or where is this going to end? How is this going to impact all my hobbies and things I love to do? There's so many questions. And more importantly,
there's so many times, and if you're like me, I couldn't even barely spell Parkinson's, let alone know anybody. The only one I even knew had Parkinson's was Michael J. Fox, of course.
Right.
And now I've got, dozens and hundreds of friends and colleagues who have Parkinson's in the various stages. So if there's ever a question, I can go ask it because I'm not alone. And that's something I try to emphasize, especially to the newly diagnosed. You are not alone. There are people out there who have Parkinson's, even in Hawaii.
Sure.
Because it's surprising. By my estimates, working with the Parkinson Foundation, one of our big national levels, we estimate there are 7,000 diagnosed Parkinson patients in Hawaii, probably another 3,000 undiagnosed. And that number grows almost every day.
Significant.
Yeah, it is. And one of the really bad parts is the one that hurts everybody in the pocketbook. It's the average economic impact for one Parkinson's patient is $52,000 a year.
No.
26,000.
The medications, or is that
26,000 direct costs, medication, doctor's appointments, and 26,000 in indirect costs, lost time for sick leave or being sick. I mean, all these intangibles. There's a big study done in 2018, $52 billion a year for the million Parkinson patients in the United States. Just on the Hawaii economy, that's a $350 million for the 7,000 patients. That's a huge economic burden that we're trying to stop. And here in Hawaii, I grew up in the agriculture industry, so I don't harbor any ill will to agriculture companies. In fact, I've still got a lot of my family that still works in agriculture.
Let's talk about that. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, about an hour east of LA.
Okay.
My dad was an ag teacher. I grew up in 4-H and FFA until I joined the Navy.
Sure. Did you have a prize pig or anything?
Actually, I had a whole line
Heifer?
of no, pigs.
Pigs. You were a pig guy. Okay.
JRB Hampshires.
Okay.
I had a whole line of ham pigs, but I also showed beef and sheep and things of that nature. So I was around, my dad was an ag teacher.
Sure.
So I was around a lot of insecticides and pesticides growing up. And that's one of the primary linkages for Parkinson's.
Okay.
I won't say that's the cause of it because after I joined the Navy, I ended up spending a lot of years as a propulsion engineer on ships. And when you're around,
exposed to a lot of different,
especially when we got to the jet engines, there's a lot of compounds they say are carcinogenic. Well, if they're carcinogenic, that means they're really bad for you. That means they're probably bad in other ways.
Right.
Yeah, and the other two linkages, Muhammad Ali and traumatic brain exposure.
Sure.
Being a veteran, all these guys coming out of the sandbox where their brain's been beat around from traumatic brain injuries.
They haven't revealed themselves yet because they're still very healthy, but then they start to over time the scarring or whatever it is that happens.
Yeah, so as a consequence, out of that million Parkinson patients in the U.S., 1 in 8 or 120,000 of them are veterans.
Wow.
Which is a much higher rate of incidence than it is for non-veterans.
Right.
And so much of that is, we have a lot of the Agent Orange folks coming out of Vietnam and things like that, but the growing numbers coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan from the IEDs. And anytime you rattle your brain around the brain pan called the cranium, it's not good things happening.
It's bad physics.
It is. Then the last part is there are a certain amount of people, small amount, probably about 3 to 5% that get it from their parents. So there are a few of those. And no matter how you end up with it, they've figured out that basically once you have Parkinson's, doesn't matter how you got it, pretty much all your progression is basically the same.
Some are the same. And it's irreversible so far.
It is. It's irreversible and uncurable. And that's the insidious part. So what we do when we try to treat is we treat the symptoms, because our whole goal here is to help Parkinson patients and their families have the best life possible while the disease progresses. And we do this by what I call the Parkinson treatment triangle. On one side is the medication. You have medication that allows you to control your body enough so you can do other things.
Right.
So on the second side of the triangle is exercise. The way I explain Parkinson's and typically what it does, it tries to lock your body up. Say you're in an old car where it has a handbrake. And you're sitting at a stoplight and you pull the handbrake because you need to look something in the center console.
Right.
And so you're sitting there with the handbrake on, you're looking around, all of a sudden you notice a light turn green. And you forget to take the handbrake off, and the car tries to go, and you see the car, and it's shaking.
Right, good.
But it's trying to go until you either get enough energy to overcome the handbrake, or you remember to take the handbrake off.
I see.
Parkinson's very much the same.
Okay.
If you're standing on the street corner, you'll see some people that are sitting there kind of weaving, and it looks like they're trying to go. That's a strategy for somebody that's frozen in place from Parkinson's. They weave back and forth until
Create
they
some momentum.
and then they get going.
Okay.
And it's the same type of thing.
So it's a cognitive way you look at it, because you're seeing it happen. A lot of times people get frozen and they don't know what to do.
Right. And so there's different strategies that those types of people have. And the third side of the triangle is your wellness, your diet, nutrition, and spirituality, and intimacy, sexuality. I mean, all this goes into your mental state.
Because all this changes.
Right. But at the very heart of it, this three-sided triangle is you right in the center.
Right.
And it recognizes your body, and you are a system, and you have to treat the whole system. You can't just treat one piece of it.
Right.
And so that's one of the things. There are people that have had a lot of luck doing exercise, and you'll hear them say that. You know, I do 20 hours exercise a day and it cures my Parkinson's. No, it just puts you in such good shape that it masks what's going on underneath.
Masks those symptoms that if their strength if they weren't as strong, that they would be more significant.
Right.
So the strength that they do, this training that they do, helps to it slows the progress.
Doesn't even really slow it. It just minimizes the symptoms from it.
I see.
And so, because that train underneath,
that keeps going.
It just keeps chugging and chugging and chugging.
Okay.
No matter what you do. And so you have to optimize your treatment, because the one really hard thing about Parkinson's is we have a saying: if you met one Parkinson patient, you met one Parkinson patient. Every person's symptoms are unique. So every person's treatment has to be equally unique. I've got a friend that just opened up Fitness Therapy Hawaii, named George Ma, and I was talking to George one day, and he says, yeah, if I had to go back and do it over again, I probably wouldn't treat Parkinson patients. It's very rewarding now, but it is so hard, because everybody that comes in for treatment, you can't just throw them in a cookie cutter class and everybody go do the same thing.
No.
He has to go through this extensive assessment with a person, and then he has to design an individual training plan designed for that person. So every person that comes through has to go through that whole process.
Sure.
So
now, is he a physical therapist? Is that where, or is a speech therapist?
No, he's a personal trainer.
Oh, okay. All right.
Bodybuilder, jiu-jitsu, but he's really gotten heavy into the Parkinson training. And Fitness Therapy Hawaii, which they just had their grand opening last Sunday, is dedicated to Parkinson fitness, where we have a lot of other places that do Parkinson's training and Parkinson's exercise as part of their overall regime. Like all the YMCA, we partner with them and we train their instructors. Then they give Parkinson exercise class, which is great. One of our most exciting things that's going on this year is the Parkinson and Movement Disorder Center at Queens. Just got certified by the Parkinson Foundation Center of Excellence folks. They're now certified as a Center of Excellence for what we call CCC, Comprehensive Care Center. Which is really great for us, because there's only about 30 of these in the United States. So they're pretty rare. But that means their care is top notch. They've got 2 of the 3 specialists we have in the States working at Queens. But it also means a lot of people want to go there to work with them. Not just patients going to get treated there, but a lot of people that are in training to become specialists. And the state legislature, believe it or not, this year was actually really supportive of us. I put in for a $500,000 grant, and they gave me just under $300,000, because, like I said, we have 3 specialist doctors, movement disorder specialists, or neurologists. We have 3. We're going to have 4 as soon as the 4th one gets done training. He's in selection right now.
Sure.
And so we're going to go from 3 to 4. You don't think that's much of it?
Well, in Hawaii, trying to find a specialist, particularly for anything, but a whole person, not just So I imagine it was a lot of work to find folks, the physicians that are willing to or understand what the disease is.
Yeah, and one of the challenges I was talking to Dr. Bruno, the center's director, is movement disorder is not one of these sexy neurologicals like being a thoracic surgeon or a cardiac surgeon.
Sure.
You're a movement disorder. You got to go work with Alzheimer's and Parkinson patients and Huntington patients. That's not sexy. That's hard work.
Right.
And so we don't have our MDS don't have the pay scale that these sexy neurologists have.
Right.
Which in Hawaii is already a challenge.
Right.
And there's only 650 movement disorder specialists nationwide. So I mean they're hard to come by anyways. I spent 4 years trying to recruit one.
Right.
After not being able to recruit one, I finally said, "Screw it, we'll make one ourselves if we can't."
So the grant is to create a position to support
a fellowship. fellowship, and there's really two parts. You have the candidate part who comes in, and it's going to take a general neurologist. He basically has to give up his regular practice to go into the Queen's system. And we recruit nationwide for these positions. We were expecting 3 applicants for this position. We had 7.
Well, hey,
that is actually
it's a good problem.
That's a good problem, and it's a fantastic sign. And so one of my challenges, since I was the bill payer on this whole thing, is to put sustainable funding in place to sustain the program, because they can turn out one specialist a year with the current number of trainers they have. Because it's going to take both the specialists to train one guy, just because it's very time consuming and very intensive. And so they can do 1 a year. So my challenge is to go out and get more money so we can keep doing 1 a year.
Right.
Because the goal, that's okay. Let me back up and say, I'll stop and hold on the goal for a second.
Sure.
The second part of the project is when have a condition like Parkinson's, you don't need to see the neurologist every time. I could probably see the neurologist himself once a year, but you need to see somebody else. If you have trained nurse practitioners or physician's assistants who are neurological based, and you give them specialty training, you can see them during what we call the maintenance period, or just kind of routine appointments. If you're just kind of floating along and nothing's really changed, and there's no real reason you need to see the specialist.
Right. You can see, maybe get some education or update on some new things that are out, or if there's...
But yeah, so an NP or PA can do that. So the second part of the project that I'm working is to get some neurological trained PAs and NPs, give them the specialty training, so that between the two of them, we can actually send them out to the neighbor islands where they have zero
coverage.
They do. They literally have zero. And the doctors themselves, neurologists, will probably always be based in Oahu, because there's a lot of accreditation issues that they have to be with we call it the mothership.
Mothership, right. They got to have the master sort of credential person that holds all their insurance and everything. Yeah, so they'll, until we get a lot of movement disorder specialists, they'll probably always be here on. And it's not just Queens. There's one at Kaiser. We have a couple doctors who their vast experience, they could actually write the fellowship programs instead of having been through it. So Koakini, there's one at the VA. There's actually 2 at the VA, but one just retired and he's only doing research now. Right. And there's the second one at VA, but we want to expand that out here in Oahu, so there's at least more here on Oahu. Right. But then we want to push these NPs and PAs out to the neighbor islands, so we have much better coverage. Well, and I won't say, I can't forget West Oahu. Right. Because West Oahu is drastically underserved, and we really... In a lot of different areas. Yeah, and with Queens West, it's given us a golden opportunity in partnership with Queens to expand out to cover more of that West Oahu group of folks. Now, you're talking about this like it's sort of secondhand. You do it as a hobby, but when you're saying you're signing, checks for $300,000, that's why we're in the boss's office. So tell us about your Navy career and how that helped you to sort of headlong into this, not only facing this disease, but also building what you've built here. Yeah, my Navy career, I would say, was not normal. Kind of started off normal. I enlisted for a year, went to Naval Academy Prep School. Then I got into Naval Academy, did my 4 years there, and came out as an ensign. My first ship was an aircraft carrier out of Japan. So went out and got my warfare qualification and went through Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Got a whole bunch of fruit salad, as I call ribbons and stuff that everybody got. And then I transferred to, we decommissioned that ship after 28 months. It's now an aircraft carrier museum in San Diego. That's USS Midway. And then I went off to a cruiser and did engineering on the cruiser, and we deployed to Somalia and the Middle East. Sure. Well, I was over in Somalia, 93. So was I. Yeah. I was in Mogadishu. I was off the coast of Mogadishu. Yeah, I think you guys were out there. Yeah, I was supporting the Marines and things that were there. We were there at the same time. That's crazy. Commander Naval Forces Somalia was my boss's titles. But anyways, so I got off there, and I was supposed to go to postgraduate school from there, kind of typical Navy. Which is the career up to but they had a manning issue, and so they yanked me out of that, and they sent me to Saudi Arabia for 2 years to work in the embassy, to work in what's called Foreign Area Officer Program. Okay. Which is, you work on the embassy, you work with the foreign military, either you do a lot of sales and training type stuff. So all liaison, so they understand the product, the equipment.
a lot of that.
Connections.
And I was advising them in the area of operations and things like that. But I spent 2 years doing that, working with embassy folks and learning the political military side. And that set me down a different kind of career path. When I was on ships, I was hardcore Navy surface warfare type guy.
Tactical.
Working my way up to be the captain of the ship. But when I would roll ashore, then I would head off to embassies and things like that. So I went from Saudi Arabia, then I went back to ship in Japan, then I went to an afloat destroyer squadron staff in San Diego. But then I went down to Jamaica for 18 months.
Not bad duty.
No, working in the embassy there it was quite good actually, except for I drove a light armored vehicle to work every day because the drug trade was so robust. It was a pretty dangerous place.
Right.
Some of it was. Some other gorgeous places.
Sure.
And so I came back from Jamaica and I went back to the USS Ronald Reagan. Went back to the war fighting there. And then I went out to Bahrain where I was on the numbered fleet staff out in Bahrain. I was working at 5th Fleet. And then I came back to Hawaii, but I was working as Deputy International Engagement for the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Okay. Which means I was working in the political military world. I was a specialist in Northeast Asia, Korea, and Russia. Back when they were still our friend.
That's right. Okay.
So I actually got to go up to Moscow and go to the Kremlin and stuff as part of my official duties.
Very cool.
And they came in here, but I was also working. I oversaw all the rest of the Pacific, all the stuff in Oceania and South Asia. And so I had a lot of political military experience, and with that experience came a lot of network building, learning how to build network and deal with people, especially on a pretty high level, because a lot of the people we were dealing with in the embassies were ministers and admirals and generals.
These are key lever, folks. These guys were making big decisions for the U.S. government and for their counter in the other countries that you were working with too. You were dealing with across the board, sort of this. What would you call it? It's maybe even higher than C-suite. I don't know what you call it. It's super political executive set.
Absolutely. In fact, when I was at U.S. Pacific Fleet, I used to run this one course called Combined Forces Maritime Component Commander course. It was a 1 to 2 star level course. Half of the course was U.S. and half of the course was foreign nations would provide officers. But one of the prerequisites, and we won't say this was written anywhere, but we always wanted the up-and-comers, because what we were trying to do is build those relationships not only from us to them, but among themselves, so that if something happened out there and things got tense, you always had a phone tree that you could pick up and call the buddy over on the other side.
Right. Yeah, you need that connection because, you're spread, the Navy, right?
Yeah.
Spread out, especially this region, Pacific region. That's probably, I don't know if it's the largest naval.
It is 52% of the world.
Right. So,
Pacific region.
Not a small job.
No, and so, at one point when I was working maritime security and policy at U.S. Pacific Command, I had contacts in probably 30 or 40 different countries from all the dealings I did. And so I could literally just pick up the phone, and I knew somebody pretty much everywhere. In fact, I've still got a few people that not so much that we're friends anymore because I don't talk to them on a routine basis, but I see him pop up. And a guy that I worked with back in 2000, I guess it was, is now a 4-star admiral in the Thai Navy.
Oh, okay.
And he's at one point we were friends with the senior admiral in the Korean Navy. And he retired and went off and did other stuff. But these were the types of guys that I was dealing with. Right. To give me a different level of experience than most. So when I was diagnosed, and after I was diagnosed in late 13, and I got that's when I retired out of Pacific Fleet. It took me about a year to find another job. And I went to work at Pacific Command, but that's when I started kind of engaging in the Parkinson world. Okay. And so the first thing I did was in 15, we do an annual fundraiser in the fall. And I put together a team, and I tied for a high fundraising team, $3,420. Oddball amount, me and this other guy tied on the day of the walk.
Oh, no way.
Such an oddball amount, you wouldn't believe that we did, but we did. But that introduced me to the local Parkinson community, which they asked me to come onto their board. And a few months later, the next time the president came up, they looked around and nobody wanted to put their hands forward. You know, Navy's an acronym itself, don't you?
No, I didn't know that. I'm an Army guy, so I don't know.
Never again volunteer yourself.
That sounds about right.
Well, I still haven't learned that one. And so they asked me to, I was on the board for about 6 months, and they asked me to take over the board. And I looked around and says, yeah, I definitely have the leadership skills. I was worried about my Parkinson levels of knowledge.
Right.
And somebody got it right. They says, that'll come.
Right.
The longer you're around it, the more,
right.
Yeah. So go ahead and take the job. So I did. So in early 17, April 17, I became the president of the Hawaii Parkinsons Association. So the first thing I did was I took a step back and kind of did a needs assessment. What are our two greatest needs? One was support groups for caregivers, because we have a lot of talk stories support groups for patients where people can get in and support each other, exchange best practices and lessons learned. But we didn't have anything for caregivers. As I say, caregivers need love too.
Well, they're the ones that drop out just as fast almost as the ones they're caring for, because they don't get the sleep or rest a lot of times, and they're worrying too. Just the worrying part, their load is heavy. Yeah,
and the way I've come to my understanding has evolved now. As a patient, in some respects, it's almost easier because I worry about me. The caregiver worries about themselves and me.
Right.
And that's my wife. But there's also a distinction we make nowadays between care partners and caregivers.
Okay.
Care partners are your partner. If you don't need somebody to do a lot of things, but you have somebody with you, that's a care partner. If the caregiver is doing most of the things for the patient, that is a caregiver. So it's how much help you need if it's a partner or a giver. Like I can still, dress myself, take care of myself. I cook. I still do knife work in the kitchen.
Sure.
Even though I've been diagnosed almost 9 years now.
Sure.
I just need a partner at this point. In the future, when I'm not unable to do most of that, then I'll need a caregiver.
Caregiver, right.
So we kind of make that distinction because they have to be treated separately.
That's interesting that there's that distinction there, because again, it's trying to focus on the independence level, the things trying to maintain that independence for a longer period.
That quality of life,
right.
Yeah. And so that's become, I won't say a buzzword, but it's definitely gaining acceptance because it's a common sense type approach. And there is a big distinction between how much support the caregiver and the care partners need themselves, where the caregivers need much more help themselves. So I kind of forgot where we were talking about.
Well, just that caregivers are tough, but then needs assessment you did, yeah.
Yeah. So the second need was we needed medical specialists, which we've kind of talked about how it's taken me 5 years to get to the point where we're able to start building those medical specialists. We did do at one point what I call a beta test for one of the nurse practitioners. One of our organizations that we work with trained a nurse practitioners, sent her over to, or no, actually it was a PA, sent her over to Kona, and then the pandemic hit. Office had been open three months. Pandemic hit, no patients. Unfortunately, the office imploded.
Right.
And so the person had to end up closing down and coming back here.
Sure.
Which was really a crying shame. But the one thing it did do is it was a proof of concept. It proved that it can be done, and there is definitely an appetite, because all of the Parkinson community on the Big Island was just crushed when that happened, because they were all lining up. It was taking a little time, but not too bad. All lining up and getting in to see her, and she was doing a good job, and they were feeling pretty good about her.
Right.
So that's proof of concept.
Yeah, it really helps them. But someone like that really helps them navigate both through the disease, but also through sort of the complicated process of trying to find information. Sometimes insurance is difficult, trying to figure all that out.
Yeah, that's one of the things when Dr. Bruno was getting ready to stand up the Parkinson Movement Disorder Center. She stood that up in 2020, by the way, as well. So, I mean, it's fairly new, but it lasted through the pandemic because it had Queen's support behind it. And Queen has really been great in putting their support behind it. But when Dr. Bruno in late 19 was putting the office together, she came to me for some advice and sit down, because the community, we work very symbiotically with the doctors. They see the patient periodically. We work in between those visits to help them out with quality of life. And we have to work together to make it right for the patient. So Dr. Bruno was talking to me about standing up their office. My mother had been a nurse for 35 years.
Okay.
An RN, so I understood the nurse world. And she's talking about the different doctors and different specialists, PTs, OTs, that she was going to get to work in her center over there. And I said, your first hire needs to be your nurse coordinator. You got to have that person, and you need to really go. Another department's going to hate you, because you need to go around the departments of Queens and find that nurse who knows everybody, knows all the connections among all the different departments that they can call.
Right.
Pick up the phone and call and say, hey, this is something over here. I need this.
Sort of a built-in network. You had to find someone that already had the network ready to go.
And Dr. Bruno did. Her name's Brittany Teoka, and she's phenomenal at coordinating this stuff over there and works really hard. And she's kind of my direct pipeline. I mean, I can reach out to the doctors directly. I have all their phone numbers and emails.
Right.
But I try not to do that because they are so busy.
Right.
So for most of my business type stuff, I just go through Brittany, unless it's just an absolute emergency. We did have that happen. And this is one of the advantages of the networks is we had an emergency arise with one of the people in one of our groups over on one of the other islands, ended up in an emergency room. And because of lack of knowledge, not intentionally, it's just doctors have so many things to learn about so many different conditions. They just keeping up with learning, keeping
Especially
up.
Especially when they present in the ER.
Yeah, it's almost impossible.
Right.
So this one doctor was giving some inaccurate advice, and the family reached out to me for emergency help, and I reached out to the doctors who went back through their networks to the neurologists over on the other island who walked down to the emergency room and got the proper information into the docs and got the proper care.
Right.
And the weekend went much better after that.
Well, it's great to have that sort of, I would say, network. It's basically an emergency network.
It is.
But trying to get folks on. How are you using technology these days to? I know it's great to have this center and people can come in. That's really helpful. Have meetings here. It looks like you have all these different resources available. How do they get those resources? What's the best way for them? Is it online or is it here?
It's any which way they want it.
Right.
And we're kind of built that way. One of the things I did for during the height of the pandemic, so that all of our support group leaders could reach out, I went out and bought 20 Zoom licenses for a Zoom meeting so that they could meet on person. So we wanted to meet as much as we could. And I think 17 of the licenses are still in use. Now, as we're coming out of the pandemic and have come out, I've encouraged our folks to do hybrid meetings.
Okay.
Because there are people that, because they're housebound, they can't make it to the meetings, but they can participate by Zoom.
Right.
I encourage the people that can to come in, do it by person. Zoom is great. It's a tremendous tool, but there's nothing like the human personal interaction.
Sure.
Because you read so much more in person than you can over the Zoom, just body language and things. And so many people like to turn their cameras off. But if you're sitting there, somebody sitting next to you, you can't turn that camera off. It doesn't exist.
And you really get a feel for who they are and the experience they're going through. It's so much more three-dimensional. Besides this, you can get an idea. But
one of the challenges that we've encountered as we've started trying to go back to in-person or hybrid events is a lot of the places we used to meet have redone the rules and are charging a lot more. And for a small nonprofit, that presented a challenge. And we're here at St. Francis, and the CEO is a good friend and helped me get this space and get it at a good price and set it all up. But what they've also done is they've opened up a lot of their resources at the rest of the campus. They've got a brand new senior center that has training rooms, exercise rooms. They've got a cooking classroom.
Okay.
Beautiful courtyard. And we've worked deals so that we have moved one of our biggest support groups from a church downtown to here.
Okay.
We moved our choir from a church in Aiea to here, just because the prices of those venues had gone up so drastically. A lot of it they attributed to cleaning. Some of it is new procedures, whatever.
Right.
But St. Francis has been phenomenal in letting us do stuff. So we're doing more and more here. We had our symposium here. We had 96 people in person, 86 people online, and did our symposium this spring.
So is it how often do you get together as a whole group in Hawaii? And then tell us, there's a little bit story about, there's some international folks as folks get together and try and understand that. So tell us about, how often you do get together as a group all at once, and then this story about this beautiful art piece behind us.
Yeah, we get together twice a year. In the spring, we do an educational symposium, and that's all it's about. We bring in speakers. Last year, we actually had Jimmy Choi, who's an American Ninja Warrior with Parkinson's.
Sure. Oh, wow.
And he zoomed in from Chicago. It was phenomenal. So in the spring, we do strictly in education. In the fall, that's in April to coincide with Parkinson Awareness Month, and in World Parkinson Day, which is April 10th. So we're normally around that time. In November we do our big fundraiser of the year. It's all about fundraising and exercise. So we do We do a walk at Magic Island.
Okay.
This year it's going to be Sunday, November 6th at Magic Island. We start early in the morning, about 7, and we're done by noontime because a lot of Parkinson patients, due to fatigue and symptom issues, aren't good for more than about half a day.
Right.
So we don't do these big, long events.
Yeah.
We get in. We have a big resource area there where all the people that are represented in this room, all the drug companies, manufacturers, healthcare systems, local companies, they all come up and set up tables.
They're at Sand Island.
Magic Island.
Oh, Magic Island, yeah.
And so they all set up tables so people can come out and get education and learn while we're doing exercise pieces. I think this year, we were just talking about it today, I think we're going to highlight pickleball this year.
Well, that's very popular. Everybody's
a lot of people are getting into it. A couple years ago, we did ping pong because the Aloha Ping Pong Association down on Dillingham.
Right.
We had a Parkinson patient in part of their group, and he brought it to our light, so we highlighted them. But we get all sorts of folks. Like I said, anybody that deals with Parkinson's is more than welcome to come. We do, it's not that expensive for local folks as far as vendors. It's a completely free event for anybody, but always fundraising is encouraged. But Parkinson's is a worldwide condition. We estimate there's somewhere between 6 and 8 million Parkinson patients worldwide. And a large genesis of that is in large populations, China, Japan, Korea, because they're also aging populations. And so there's a lot of connections between Hawaii and those countries. Well, every 3 years, the Parkinson research community gets together for what's called the World Parkinson Congress. And the last one is in 2019 in Kyoto. And 3 ladies who are of Japanese extract got together and decided to do what they call Project Hope. And they started making origami cranes, and they put messages of hope inside. And you can see the one that's right there. Even princesses can become warriors when facing dragons. Let's slay the dragon, Parkinson's, that we all face. So all of them have messages of hope in there. And they brought them all together at the World Parkinson Congress. They had 32 umbrellas with over 16,000 cranes.
Wow.
It was this huge, gorgeous display. But to get one of the umbrellas with some of the cranes, you had to write an essay. And what you were going to do with if you brought it back, how it would fit into your overall.
Sure.
And because of our Hawaii's connection to Japan, which I'm a member of the Honolulu Japanese Chamber of Commerce, which doesn't hurt anything, I wrote this essay that we were going to use it here in the Resource Center as a focal point. As the name implies, it's Project of Hope. So anybody that comes in for a visit, as we show them around, if they want to stop and make a crane, we have instructions. We have origami paper. They can make a crane, and we're always open if somebody wants to make a donation, but it's not required.
Sure.
And we add it to our Project Hope umbrella to show that we still have hope for the future here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so, but we're also one of the things that our choir, there's also a World Parkinson Congress choir. And so I've challenged our choir to send a couple members to the next international meeting, which is going to be next year. We got off by a year because of the pandemic.
Sure. Are you a bass or a baritone?
Me, not me. Please do not call us back. We're not going to be calling you. No, I don't sing, but I challenged our choir to send a couple members to Barcelona for our next World Parkinson Congress next summer.
Next summer, 2023, they'll be back together since 2019 then.
Right.
So that'll be quite an event.
So we're going to go, our admin marketing guy, Glenn Higa, who's also a personal trainer, he and his wife are going to go, and maybe some other folks. We're all going to make a trip because we had, the last one, about 3,500 people for just this monster. And the networking opportunities as well as the educational opportunities. They run about 10 or 12 different seminars all simultaneous with so many people.
Sure.
So since we're there all together, we kind of break up as a team and cover as many seminars as we can.
Right.
Then I have as many meetings with the drug companies as I can, because the one thing about being in Hawaii, everybody knows we're resource poor. There's 2 ways to get resources. You either have the money and you go out and buy the resources,
or get somebody to give it to you.
Yeah, you get somebody. You have to set the conditions right.
Sure.
To make people.
You're not just looking for a handout. You're looking for,
And a perfect example is in the world of clinical trials. Hawaii in clinical trials has, because we've been working very hard, and we have 2 clinical trial sites. One is Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience, and the other is Pacific Health Research and Education Institute.
Okay.
And I advocate very strongly for clinical trials, kind of as we talked about earlier. And because of that, and as well as their efforts, we have been top 5 in recruiting for trials, in multiple trials over the last 3 or 4 years.
Because they know they can find some candidates, good pool of candidates.
So drug companies are starting to look at Hawaii because we have a large Asian population, which is one of the 4 primary demographics: Asian, African American, Latino, and Caucasian. So we have this large Asian population who is bent towards volunteerism,
Right.
which is great. So it's setting the condition for the drug companies, because I told you how much money it costs, so they don't want to go somewhere that they're not going to be able to execute a drug trial.
Sure.
Not all of them are successful, like the nicotine one.
Right.
Ultimately ended up being not successful.
That's part of the trial.
It is.
Right.
And there is some danger, but I also lead by example. So I've done multiple trials. The last one included, it was a short one. It was only about a month and a half long, but it also included 2 spinal taps.
Okay.
But they're not like they used to be with the old glass pipette. Our doctors, we have some really, really skilled doctors around here. There's an anesthesiologist upstairs who trained at the Mayo.
Okay.
And he was the one that did my second spinal tap, because they actually put it in. Then I took my medicine, trial medicine, and they wanted to see my blood levels
around that.
Yeah. So I had the spinal tap in for 7 hours. And they would come in every hour and take some cerebral spinal fluid, then they would take blood, so they could check all the trial med levels.
Right.
But because it was a flexible catheter and it was well taped down, I could lay down, I could sit down, I could stand up, I could walk around, I could eat.
It wasn't like you had to be immobile as they used to be, right?
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's a tribute to our amazing docs that we have that kind of capability here to do that. But that trial was very successful. There was only 48 people nationwide in the trial, and we had 3 or 4 of them here. So, which is for such a small population of about 1.5 million in Hawaii.
Right, that's quite well represented, higher than any other state, sounds like.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do here from the Hawaii Parkinsons Association to get more people in is we provide those 2 trial organizations with travel stipends.
Okay.
So that patients from the neighbor islands can come over to the main trial sites and actually participate in the trials. And then while they're here, they usually see their regular neurologists and do all their other appointments. And we pay for it on our dime to facilitate that. So we're setting conditions so that we can bring in the drug companies with the big money to here. So
and see, I think for the audience, folks listening out there that will see the non-for-profit, the success you've had, like you said, there's drug companies and different folks that are but I'm sure they're curious, like, how do I get my not-for-profit off the ground? What's the first step? Because again, it seems like that's why I asked about your Navy experience. It's like you just developed this network and it just seems like easy for you. But for other folks, how do you get that message out and share? It feels like it's the story.
Well, the first thing I did that really kind of jump-started me was I was participating in other people's like senior expos. They do the big ones in Blaisdell, but probably the biggest one is the Sister Mary Ann Cope Walk that St. Francis runs. Because the first one I went to, this guy was standing in one of the booths. I went over and started talking to him, very unassuming type guy. Well, it turns out it's Jerry Correa, CEO of St. Francis.
Okay.
And then I requested a meeting with him, and I still meet with him regularly as a healthcare business mentor. And so I went to him and said, hey, I need help and I need advice. So you find somebody that's got some experience and some smarts on this stuff and is successful, and you get them to help you out, because most of these guys are great guys.
Because part of their leadership responsibility, I think, and I think it's the same in the military too. That they're supposed to bring sort of an active mentorship with the several people, at least as part of their leadership thing, is that they're supposed to be mentoring someone, so they take on that responsibility as part of their ongoing leadership. So
one of the things I did was we have an executive council that's made up of the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer of the association. Well, I have an executive board, executive advisory board just for me. It's Jerry Correa, Rich Wacker, who used to be the CEO of ASB, also a Parkinson patient.
Wow.
And then the third guy I've asked and I talk to periodically is the CEO of Tory Richards.
Okay.
And I came into him met him in a different manner, because I'm a big Tori Richards fan, so I buy lots of Tori Richards shirts. And it came to his notice, and so I haven't talked to him since as much as I should lately, but we developed a friendship. And he had some friends that had Parkinson's, so he asked me for some help. But you develop a relationship with these smart guys, and they also introduce you to higher level folks because donations from the average person are nice, and they're kind of our lifeblood.
Right.
But if you're going after the big money, going after the whales, if you want to call it that, you got to go up a higher level. So that first meeting with Jerry at the Sister Mary Ann Cope Walk has been critical to everything I've done since. But beyond that, sometimes you just have to go out. Now, I'm fortunate because I'm a retired Navy, so I have that pension. Plus, I'm a senior GS now, so I'm still making money.
Sure.
That's allowed me the freedom to go to, like, we went to Kyoto, and we paid for that trip ourselves. I didn't put it on the nonprofit.
Right. And
because I used to live in Japan, I knew the culture and knew how to deal with it. But I went to every drug company that I deal with, that you see around the room, all the representatives who are not the powers, and I says, I want to meet with your head shed when I'm in Kyoto. And in 3 days, I did 11 meetings. Now, the other part is you need to have a good team.
Right.
My wife is my team.
Okay.
And we worked unbelievably well. Because when I'm in one meeting, she's already reaching out to the next group, going over and talking to them and kind of prepping them for me. So when I roll in, they're already ready to go hot and heavy with the big stuff.
You guys are a good tag team, and that helps a lot. You have good, as you're trying to develop something, you got to have some folks who are, I guess, committed.
Yeah. And you have to have that. And you have to take some time to find the right folks to make your core organization too. Because you get a lot of folks who are very well-meaning who want to come in, volunteer once. And so we volunteer, let them help out at our symposium in the walk.
Sure.
Finding the longer terms, the people that are willing to do the support groups, meet every month, or become board members when there's always stuff to be done, especially your executive board members. Those people are much rarer. And so in 5 or 6 years, I've probably had less than 10 of those type of people. And some of them are transient. Like one of them was the wife of a Coast Guard captain, and he was here working on U.S. Pacific Fleet staff.
But she jumped right in.
Oh my God. Lindsay Sutton was a godsend. She's a yogi, certified yogi, with a PhD in like history or something like that, but just the brain power. And so she was this huge workout monster, but really, really smart. And her husband told me that when I met her for the first time, I looked at her and says, I want you to take over all my exercise programs. Scared the hell out of her. So she went away and thought about it. Then we met again, and I started feeding her. But what I did was I empowered her. I says, you go out. I'm going to stay out of your knickers. I'll give you some guidance, and I'll tell you what I want, what I'm looking at, and you just run with it. And she did. And our exercise programs exploded. And when she came to me, she was very, very modest in her requests. So she was always a very good steward of the donations that came in. So if she needed money for something, like over in Maui, the YMCA was trying to start a boxing program. And so she says, yeah, I think this is a great deal. So we went out and bought like $750 worth of equipment for them to get their program started. And things like that. But we went, and where did we buy the equipment? We didn't go to the most expensive guy, high end. We found what we were looking for, then we went to Amazon.
That's right.
But, I mean, they have a lot of stuff at a very good cost. And so we went in and worked through their list till we found the right stuff that was the right fit at the right cost. And I ordered it and sent it directly to them.
Right.
But she did that. And now Parkinson has become her passion. Her and her husband moved back to the mainland, moved to Texas, and he retired. But she's working on getting a doctorate in occupational therapy.
Okay.
And he himself is working in medical admin. So he went from being a Coast Guard captain to working in medical admin. Both of them were heavily influenced by the work they did here.
Yeah.
And so you find people like that, and you never know where you're going to come across these people. Sometimes they are, people that are working full time. We've got a guy that works for a local tech company. He's their head of marketing, and he works darn near the same amount of hours I do, or even more. But yet he's an IT guy. So when we do our symposium or our walk, he does all the IT stuff and hooks me up with all that kind of stuff. And just the amount of hours that he's devoted, and it's because his father has Parkinson's and more advanced Parkinson's.
And usually that's curious how that works out. If the volunteer, you usually start because you're impacted in some way because of the disease. You have a family member, friend.
Probably 75 or 80%. The few people that we don't at least know somebody, like we've got a friend that was not a social worker, but it was a coordinator that worked for the government, for the state government, that people needed resources and wouldn't know where to go to find out information. You go to her and she would reach out and connect you with all these different places.
Right.
Well, she retired from her job, but we spent the last 10 years tailgating for UH Athletics.
Okay.
So we became very close friends. And so after she retired, I'm sort of like, so what are you going to do now? I've got a couple openings. I could use some hand. And we kind of worked her into it and trained her up. And so now she's just recently taken over one of the shifts here at the Resource Center.
Sure.
And then we have a couple other folks who just didn't have a lot of relationship to Parkinson. They knew of it and ran into a few people along the way. But yeah, probably the vast majority are all invested because of friends, family, or for the Resource Center, we're open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 3. And out of the six time slots that we have workers in, right now we have 2 that actually have Parkinson's, 2 that are caregivers, and 2 that just have what we call loose connections. One's our friend and one's another person like that. So we try to have that balance because we want to have available all the different sides. So if somebody walks in and they want to talk to somebody that actually has Parkinson's, we can reach out to those folks. But if they come in as a caregiver, we get a lot of caregivers that come in. They need to be able to talk caregiver to caregiver.
Right.
So we have, and Pat, who's our Resource Center manager, is also retired nurse, caregiver for 30 plus years for her husband, who's a retired physician who's been a Parkinson patient for 30 plus years.
Wow.
So her experience is vast. And so we have a couple caregivers. Then we have other folks like our friend that I was just talking about that has all these connections and lived here her whole life and born here. So she knows everybody under the sun, or his kids went to school with everybody.
Right.
One of those people that just, there's very few people that she can't connect with in about 2 degrees.
Right.
And so those are the great types of people to have for the long term. They're committed, they're dedicated. And one thing that we're proud of our organization is a completely volunteer organization. Nobody gets a paycheck from us. Everything they do is just strictly out of the goodness of their heart.
Sure. And nobody can say no to Jerry.
That's the idea.
Once you get him in a room, that's it.
I get something out of them.
That's right.
Yeah, and you have to have somebody like that. You have to have somebody that has my wife calls it the gift of gab, but who has the ability to talk to people. And one of the things we're working on right now is I've been doing more and more legislative advocacy, both on the state and national level. We're trying to put together a plan that we can show people of how we're bringing all the resources in Hawaii together to move in the same direction, and how the different pieces play together so that people understand, okay, if, say it's the legislature and they give us a grant, what's that grant going to be used and how is it really going to make a difference? The first one's easy with a fellowship. That's pretty easy. And we're going to make another doctor that's going to see a lot of patients. We need lots of those in Hawaii. But some of the other ones may not be quite so obvious. If we go reach out, say, to the Weinberg Foundation and ask for a grant for some training, well, how are we going to use that training? Well, one of our big training needs is we get together all the YMCA Parkinson instructors, exercise instructors once a year and give them refresher training. So it's pretty impactful too, because the YMCA runs the biggest Parkinson exercise program in the state for us, and it's very diverse across all 10 YMCAs across the state.
Right. So you've developed sort of a state with, if you can get the grant. So you have a grant writer who helps write, or you co-write with, that's you, huh? You got that special talent.
We actually are very fortunate. We just had a guy that's starting to volunteer. He's a professor at UH that has done grant writing. And I've been talking to him and asked him if he would help me out with the grants, because pandemic has hurt a lot of business and a lot of people. And our private donations are down about 40%. And this is going to sound strange, but at the height of the pandemic, our sponsors, business sponsors, donations were actually way up. I went from about 45,000 to about 70,000. But the reason for that is because there were so many events that had gotten shut down that all these advertising dollars all these companies had, they had nowhere to spend it. And if you could put together a package, a benefits package that would benefit them more than most, then they were more than happy to come do sponsorship with you. Because most people want to just, for the online stuff, say, give me $1,000 and I'll put your logo on my website. That doesn't give them what they need.
Right.
And so we were able to put together more robust packages. And so we ended up, everything, I had a presenting sponsor, I had a platinum sponsor, I had like 5 gold sponsors.
Sure.
Or we're down to 3 gold.
Yeah, I see some of that that you've...
Yeah, these folks have been phenomenal. We lost our presenting sponsor, we lost our platinum sponsor is now down to silver sponsor. And we're down from 5 golds to 3 golds. So even our business donations are down, but our usage of our money in our programs is skyrocketing. And so we have a delta there that we're having to make up. And the one place that we're working on to make it up is through grants. So that's why I asked this gentleman, since he's been writing grants for years, to help me out writing some grants. And the weird thing about grants is you go look for people to help you write grants. Most of them want to be paid up front for writing grants,
whether or not you get it or not.
Yeah.
And then the maintenance of that grant afterwards is also a big chore.
Yeah, and and it's a very specialized skill, and so those guys get some pretty good money out of it.
Right.
And we're a pretty small nonprofit. Our average budget for the year is only about $75,000. Well, I take that back. That was before we got the resource center.
Right.
But now that we have the resource center, our budget's still not much more, probably about $100,000. And so we're not a huge nonprofit like some of these ones, and that's why it's sometimes like YMCA is one of the biggest nonprofits in the state of Hawaii, and we buy them equipment sometimes to deal with Parkinson programs. People are looking at me like, "You're small, they're big. Why are you buying them equipment?" Well, they're big, but they also have 10 YMCA's to run with a full-time staff.
That's called space.
Yeah. And it's like, if I want my program to happen, that's cost me. But I also illicit agreements between, they only use that equipment for our programs. It's not for general use and things like that. So, I mean, we work together. And I've got a lot of friends in the nonprofit world. And because of that, that's part of the networking that I've developed. OT, PT, Meals on Wheels. I'm getting ready to send out my vendor invite list for our walk, and I think I've had 48 invitees on it.
Okay.
And that's still kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what's in Hawaii. And that's one of the other things is how you get things done is you go out and make friends. Because it cracked me up when it first happened. I'm having this event, and I charge for local for-profit companies $250 for a table.
Sure.
Which is peanuts.
Right.
But the nonprofits, I give them a table for free because the expectation is if I go to their event, I get a table for free. Because in other words, if we weren't doing that, we'd each be writing each other $250 checks. So that's just a waste of paper.
Yeah, that's right.
Why don't we just trade tables? Saves on the paperwork, makes things easier.
That's smart.
And I get quite a few nonprofits that specifically come to our events, and I consider government entities nonprofits too. Like DCCA and Senior Medical Patrol. DCCA is the fraud folks.
Okay, right.
The state fraud folks, senior fraud folks, and Senior Medical Patrol, who help out with a lot of the Medicare, Medicaid policy stuff. And so I invite them in so that they educate our seniors, our kapuna.
Right.
And like I said, anybody that's touching a Parkinson patient, I want to be friends with, network with, so I can reach out. And this goes into a lot of for-profit industries, and a lot of people kind of question that because aren't they making a profit off your membership? Yeah, they may be making a profit off our membership, but instead of our people who are going to spend the money anyways, like they need a renovation.
Right.
Why can't I find the right people to guide them through the renovations to make sure they get the right ADA equipment in the house?
Right.
Instead of going to a contractor who may not know what he's doing.
It's a valuable service.
It is. And so I never worry so much about it. And there's no kickbacks or anything like that.
Right.
People, I'll meet with anybody, but I don't ask them, and they don't offer to give me kickbacks to direct people their way.
Yeah.
Because if I had 5 people walk in offering the same services, I treat them all the same.
Right.
And we try to put them up wherever we have room. And my wife's real good about it. She keeps all the shelves and stuff, and they get rotated around so that we try to keep the displays fresh for people that come in.
Everything you wanted to know about Parkinson's disease, but we're afraid to ask. There's so much resource, and again, it's incredible what you've built. But as we all look to the future too, what is this place and what you've built here? What's the meaning to you and your experience with the disease now, and as you look forward for yourself, 5 years, 10 years, what are you hoping to see?
This whole thing, in one respect, is a very selfish exercise. Mm-hmm. And what it's about is I realize as I progress, I need services. Mm-hmm. And the only way to have those services is to make sure that they're there. How do you get them there? You build them there. Mm-hmm. And if I'm building them for myself, it's easier to build it for 10 people than it is for one.
Sure.
I don't have the money to do it all myself.
Right.
For myself. So in that respect, it's very selfish. But at the same time, as I've met more Parkinson people, make no mistake, it scared the hell out of me. The first time I went to a support group meeting, I was barely a trimmer, and I was walking in, people there in wheelchairs and walkers that could barely move and things. Mm-hmm. And I looked in the mirror 20, 25 years down the road, and it scared the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. But it also made me realize what I needed to do to make it ready, because we're all, in the end result, we all kind of end up in that kind of situation, or a lot of people do.
There's going to be trials. Sometimes a lot of people have health trials that they have to face. This happens to be yours.
Right. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of similarity between us and a lot of other ones and commonalities and things. But there's a huge need to help people with quality of life. Mm-hmm. And so it really motivated me to do the work. And what I tell people is I do my 40 hours for the Navy a week, then I do another 20, 25 hours a week and work in the Parkinson world, Parkinson work. A lot of it's in the evenings and at nighttime when I'm not sleeping anyways because of my Parkinson's. But I don't do it for the thanks. I do it because the people need it.
Right.
And a lot of friends, I look around, and this is an honest assessment. If I don't do it, who? Then who?
Right.
And I've asked that question. I've asked it out loud a couple times. Uh-huh. And the answer is there's not a lot of people that have the right skill sets, with the right intelligence, with all the right pieces, and being in the right place at the right time.
As we say, you're the guy.
I am. And it's a conversation we've had, because by our bylaws, I was supposed to have a 4-year term. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the 4 years, when we came up for elections, everybody's looking around going, oh, hell, who's going to take over?
Right.
And so the board voted an exemption so that I can continue it. It's not like I'm getting money or anything out of this.
Right.
You completely volunteer. In fact, it cost me because I pay a lot of my own expenses.
Sure. But being in that role, you have the ability to push valuable resources in the direction that you need it to.
Yeah, and one of the things I think I said before, I think the camera wasn't on when I said it, is Hawaii is recognized as one of the busiest organizations in the Parkinson world in the United States. Mm-hmm. The things that we are doing, people look at, and we're starting to be used an example. After we did our symposium, which we really did some unique stuff, we tackled mental health, which is a real challenge in itself, but I didn't do it in the normal way. We set up and we did 2 skits. Mm-hmm. Our actors were medical emulators from the Johnny Burns, or from the UH School of Nursing, not Johnny Burns, just School of Nursing. Right. And so they're actors who portray patients routinely.
Okay.
It is phenomenal. If you go over to the Hawaii Parkinsons Association website, you go to events and look in the 2022 symposium. Mm-hmm. Both of them are posted there, and they're also on YouTube. And these actors accurately portrayed Parkinson patients, because we wanted to show the mental aspects.
At the different levels of their progression of their disease?
Yeah, one was newly diagnosed, and the other one was an advanced patient, about a 10-year inpatient. But what we did was, the skits were only about 10 or 12 minutes long. Mm-hmm. Then I had a neurologist, a gerontologist, and a psychologist sitting there as subject matter experts. We spent 45 minutes talking through the scenarios, answering questions, and giving people the tools to deal with the mental health challenges of Parkinson patients.
Right.
And they came out phenomenal. Much, much, much better than I ever expected. And they're really powerful. And I've been sending these videos to all my nationwide contacts in the Fox Foundation, Parkinson Foundation. And they're using these internationally, and I'm probably going to submit them to one of the video contests for the World Parkinson Congress.
Okay. Coming up in Barcelona for next year. Okay.
Right. So the Davis Finney Foundation, one of our 3 big national foundations, saw the videos and were extremely impressed by them. And so they reached out to me, and the whole symposium, they asked me to do a podcast on how you put together a symposium like that, because everybody's got the basic cookie cutter. You bring in a keynote speaker, you start out with a few opening remarks, you let the keynote go, then you have some Q&A, then you may have another little speaker or something like that, and you call it a day, put the victory sign out.
Sure.
But when you do something like having these skits, that is way out of the box.
Yeah.
And
It
you really
provides more meaning because, again, it adds to the story. You see it.
Yeah, and the whole idea came from a survey that I read the abstract for that said when you do death by PowerPoint, people retain about 10%.
Sure.
If you can get a person to ask one question, that retention percentage goes up to about 40%. But if you sit down and have a discussion, it goes up to about 80%. I wanted people to remember and have the tools for dealing with Parkinson's, mental health challenges. So how do you do that? And so you start thinking about ways to get at it. And for us, it goes back to personal experience. We used to be big theater goers in San Diego. And one of the most engaging formats was what they call a theater and around. You have the audience is actually on all 4 sides of the stage. And it's a square stage, and the actors go up and down the aisles to come in and out. But as the audience, and there was only 5 rows of audience, so it was a very, very intimate setting. And the actors, I mean, you're literally like we are apart.
Right.
And so you're really engaged.
Involved it's like you're right in the middle of it because they're across the stage and they're in the audience and just sharing with each other. Yeah.
But the thing that it really reminded me is the play ends and everybody gets up and walk out. A lot of times when you're leaving movie theaters or stuff, people are just kind of like, okay, it's time to move on to the next event. But walking out of the theater and the round, people were always talking about what the play we just saw. Right. They were engaged and remembering, and some of the plays that I remember the best were in the theater and the round. Right. And so that gave me the idea that I need to do a skit and have actors. I had no idea where to go from there. I got really lucky. I have a friend that works in the University of Hawaii system as the Senior Science and Technology Officer. Okay. And I reached out to her and I said, Amy, and I kind of laid it out for her. I go, do you have any ideas where I can maybe get some actors? She had just seen these medical emulators in another situation. Okay. She goes, I'll reach out to their dean to see if we might be able to do something. So we ended up with the associate dean. So they introduced us and the ball rolled from there. Medical emulators. They're actors who portray patients. Okay, I've never heard that. There's an actual, it's like a full-time job over at the hospital, huh? No, they're at the University of Hawaii. Oh, University of Hawaii, okay. The director is, he's a PhD. One of the lead actors is working on his PhD thesis. And I didn't know about it, but after I was talking to somebody one day and explaining what was going on, you're like, oh yeah, my daughter's in a medical emulator back in New York. They're actors, but they play a very specific role because they come in and play patients for the upcoming doctors and nurses. So they actually get a feel for what the patients actually look like and ask the questions and then see how they're exhibiting their symptoms. They can actually put their hands on them. And these actors, you think local actors, they're not that good. These actors were phenomenal, and it was so effective that we had people coming up afterwards. Said they had tears coming down their face because these people look like they're actual Parkinson's patients, and conditions that they're having to deal with were things that they'd saw. A lot of the script had been drawn from my own personal experience as well as 2 other close friends of mine who are also patients like myself, and we're all what's called young onset. That means we were all diagnosed under the age of 50. That's kind of the distinction in the Parkinson world. And so we all drew on our own personal experience for the scenarios. But it was amazing because the other MC, I was one MC, but the other MC is Billy V. Okay. Who's a phenomenally professional person himself. And at the end of the second one, which was a guy in his 50s with his actor that was like playing his wife, and he was the Parkinson patient and she was the caregiver, and he was just starting to experience hallucinations. And so he's doing what I'm doing now because he'd studied me and he'd watched me through meetings and stuff. So he had it down perfect. And she's sitting there and had tears running down her face. And Billy called scene at the end of it. And he's like, and I wanted to introduce the actors and talk to them for a minute. He's like, do you need a minute? And she looks up at us and goes, no, I'm good.
Yeah. She was that far into the
She
acting.
just turned the waterworks on and off because she's such a professional actor.
Right. Unbelievable.
Yeah, but just the whole thing, the way we structured it was just really effective. And people ask, how do you measure effectiveness? Sometimes you have to find unusual measures. And one of the things I looked at besides the feedback sheets was I had a friend of mine and his wife who were very much into church, and they had a church function that was going to be the second half of our event. So they apologized beforehand and says, hey, we're going to cut out in the middle of it after the first skit and go to our church thing. After the first skit, my friend's wife looked at him and says, call the church people, tell them we apologize, we're not going to make it today. We're staying for the rest of this event.
Good.
And that was, to me, that them wanting to be there and take that kind of action is just phenomenal, because the information that they were getting was just huge and helpful to them, because he was, my friend's a Parkinson's patient as well. And so that's the kind of stuff that we need. Afterwards, one of the really interesting things, so I had a support group leader approach me and says, we're glad you did this, because a lot of times when you get together in the support groups, you do a lot of feel-good stuff, because everybody comes in and it's kind of a break from real life. But they said, by you getting after the hard stuff means that we can start addressing it too, because you break the water and you go after it, and then we're able to kind of follow up. Because then they went into the support group and said, hey, what'd you think about the HPA symposium and those topics? And they were able to have the conversation at even a more localized level.
They don't have to bring it up either, it's there.
I've already brought it up for them.
Right.
And so that was an effect I had not anticipated, but it's really good. And so this is why the National Davis Finney Foundation approached me about how to put something like this that's so out of the box. And that's one of the things that I do, is I try to think out of the box, go places people have not gone, and I'm not afraid to. Let me back up. That's not true. I push boundaries. A lot of times I'm nervous. A lot of times I'm afraid when I'm doing it, but I do it anyways.
Sure.
And it's like, what's the worst somebody's going to say to me? No, and I'm still right where I'm at.
Right.
What's the best thing? Somebody can actually say, sure, give me a call and let's follow up on that. And I've had that happen more than once, and we've gotten some money out of it. This place is kind of a result of something like that. We did not have the money to open up a place like this, and especially for a 5-year commitment. We had an anonymous donor step forward and give us enough money for 2 years at least. Allowed us to actually open this place up. Since then, 2 or 3 donors they didn't band together. Those donors gave us enough funds that we've been able to set aside enough money for the full 5-year lease, which we're less than 2 years into the lease. That's a pretty big financial commitment on their part.
Sure.
From my perspective, it just took a huge load off my mind, where I don't have to worry to the end of the lease about where the money's coming from.
Right.
We've taken some steps, like we're trying to. Before the pandemic got really bad, we were putting $1 out of every $3 aside for the future of the resource center. Trying to think ahead like that.
Sure.
And one of the connections I kind of mentioned is American Savings Bank. Rich Wacker, good friend and big supporter. But through him and through the COO for St. Francis, a gentleman named Nelson Moku, who used to work for ASB, we've formed a partnership with not a formal partnership, but partnership with some of the people at ASB. We now have one of their vice presidents is on our board. In fact, it's my treasurer.
Okay.
Didn't have to be a treasurer, just happened to be in banking. Just that person has the right skill sets. So we have that relationship. They're going to be one of our sponsors for the walk. And I was talking to the point of contact. The point of contact says, hey, as you're working out your volunteer stuff, let me know what you need. We'll put a team together and come over volunteer and maybe have another team that we can raise some money for you.
Sure.
So, I mean, developing those relationships, and it's not quick.
Oh, no.
But those relationships are really important.
And you have to be persistent.
And one of the you do. One of the things they always say is always have your 30-second pitch.
Right, elevator pitch, right, ready to go.
Always have it. Always be ready to ask, because I had the opportunity to talk to a couple senior politicians recently, and one of them, and I'll just say it was Josh Green, and it just happened to be, I ended up standing there talking one-on-one with Josh Green. Don't ask me how it happened.
Right.
We went up in a group of 4. I was just kind of letting the other guys who are I consider more important than me in the business
Let them
world.
do their, right.
And I was just kind of sitting there sipping on my drink, and they were all very good about their time and very respectful of Lieutenant Governor Green. They all kind of peeled off, and I was still standing there. And I'd met him before, and so I think he recognized the name. But next thing I know, he turned to me, and we're one-on-one. I got to say something to the guy.
Right.
So I started talking to him about the fellowship that we're doing and the state money. And he was really excited because he's a doctor himself.
Sure, he knows that process back and forth.
He does. And so, you know, if he gets to be governor, maybe there's an opportunity that we can do something, he can help us out.
Right.
But that was a purely opportunistic.
Right. And he'll remember because you were ready. You had something ready to go, and you were able to talk to him.
Yeah, and well, my name, the way he remembers me, since we had met before, is I tell him who I am, not my name, but I'm the president of the Parkinsons Association.
Right.
And that clicks the mind. The way his mind works, it's more the job than it is the name.
Right.
And that's okay. I know that now, so I kind of lead off with that.
Right.
And but it's good. But I was ready. I had something in my mind. I was ready to talk to him that would be of interest to him, and that I could use some help on type things. So you have to be ready for those opportunities, because you never know when stuff's going to pop up.
Right.
I happened to be back in Washington doing some national policy work, and I was in an elevator, and we have lapel pins, and I have one I had made for the Hawaii Parkinsons Association, and this guy starts squinting at my lapel pins. Everybody always looks at each other's lapel pins, see if you really matter.
Right.
He's like, Hawaii? Yeah. He starts talking to me about a friend we have in common. And he's from like the Agriculture Council. And so he's like, tell my friend, give him my regards, and oh, by the way, here's my card. You can come back. Give me a call, and you never know what we can do together.
Right.
I may never call the guy again in the world, but then again, I may.
Right.
You never know.
It's that easy, but you have to kind of make yourself known a little bit. Say it's okay to say hi, say your name, and introduce yourself. The old handshake is back now, I think.
And this is where the Navy and all the work I did in international relations, the political military affair, really come in, because you can be forward, but you have to understand where not to go over that line and be too pushy and too forward. And so a lot of that is understanding, engaging, and experience.
Right.
And so she sometimes comes up, or she'll stand off the side and give me the high sign. Because we do, in 2019, when I was talking about going around doing a lot of presentations, I did 26 presentations in 2019. Most of those to senior facilities, from audiences from 2 all the way up to 150.
Sure.
And sometimes I get a little chatty Cathy, and I get to talk.
To redirect a little bit, huh?
Well, no, she'll be sitting in the back, give me the cat sign, or
1 minute.
or move it along.
Okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that helps me be more effective.
Yeah.
And so I kind of try to remember that when I'm talking to these senior folks, because you always have to remember, senior folks, you're busy, they're busier.
Right. Time. Right.
Always try to be respectful of them and their time.
Right.
And so that's something I try to remember. And my ultimate gauge I use is when I worked in the embassy in Jamaica, I had to go down and see the ambassador one day. My boss was out of town, and she wanted her weekly update. I had 15 items to cover with her. I did it in 14 minutes. And it's like in depth so that she can understand.
Right.
Now, she's an extremely bright, she was political appointee, real estate magnate.
Right.
But she's also happened to be a great person.
Right.
And was a great ambassador for the U.S. But to cover 15 items in depth in 14 minutes is kind of my ultimate list of how I know I got the message across on every one of them, but I was still respectful of her time. So I got done. She's like, anything else? I'm like, no, ma'am. She's like, awesome.
That's awesome.
And so I try to do the same thing when I'm talking with with these different businessmen and these different legislators is you want to get your message across, but be pleasant about it, but at the same time be respectful of their time. And they don't mind you being direct. And
They prefer that. People beat around the bush, be direct.
Yeah, dealing with members of Congress has taught me a lot too, because as well as senior officers in the military, we have what's in the military called the bluff, bottom line up front. And so when I write the staffs for our members of Congress, and I try to keep them updated once or twice a year, I'll just send them a note, just let them know what's going on at home, especially the important stuff. But the first thing I put in there is I have no asks for you today, and that's what they call them in Washington. Those are the things I'm looking for. Right. And I'll put it in there right up front, and I'll underline it. I have no asks, or I have one ask. Right. And then I lead off with that one ask, because if they run short on time, they'll read that, then skip the rest and come back to it.
Right, so they don't have to ferret through all your junk, all your storytelling.
Right. And one thing that's really nice about, I am not a lobbyist, I am an advocate, because I am supremely tied to the Parkinson cause because I have Parkinson's. And there's a difference, especially in Washington, the way you're treated. Lobbyist is almost a dirty word. Not all of them get paid, but they're lobbying for something. Right. They may be connected to it, they may not be. But advocates are usually from the home district, and they will always see an advocate. And
because they have a network that there's going to vote for them potentially, but also that may want to see them doing some of the things that they're asking them to do.
Absolutely. And I was taught a really good lesson the very first time I went in 2017 for our National Policy Forum. Was I had a meeting with one of Tulsi's staffers, one of her senior staffers, and it was supposed to be a 20-minute meeting. And I went in and started talking to him, and he's like, "This is your first time, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, crash course time." He pulled out a piece of paper and started teaching me, no kidding, from an insider's view, how the House really works. Right. He spent 45 minutes for a 20-minute conversation. And I asked him about it partway through, because I'm trying to be respectful of his time, get in and get out on my time. Right. And he says, "Oh, I just got some lobbyists. Don't worry about them. They'll come back."
They can wait, yeah.
Because they'll come back tomorrow, if not the next day or the next
That's right.
Because they're always back where I'm only there once a year to talk to them. And that was an extremely important lesson for the different types of people. So not everybody is created equal. So you have to really understand who you're talking to. Because one of the things I do for the military is, before I went to the meeting, I did my homework. I did my homework on the member of Congress. I also did the homework on the staffs. So I knew who they were, where they'd been educated, and what their predilections were for what subjects they really liked to be advocated for. So when I went in to talk to them, we understood each other. And I'd sent some information. I'd sent like a mini small bio on me at a time, so they understood who I was. Because they read just volumes every day, and it helps them out if you give all that ahead of time, because the meetings are always what take longer than...
Then they don't have to catch up. They're already up to speed. You're up to speed. You come in, what'd you say, bottom line up front?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, last year when we were doing everything by Zoom, I actually had a meeting with Representative Case. And he surprised me. He has a personal connection to Parkinson's anyway, so he was very interested. But I'd send him read-aheads, and we come on to Zoom, and he knows staff gets it all ready and gets it all set up, and he comes on. And I started to go over some of the stuff. He goes, "Oh, stop right there." He goes, "I read everything you sent in. Here's what I'm interested in." And so I shifted gears, and we went from there.
Yeah, so then you became a resource, a subject matter expert for him.
Right. But a member of Congress had actually read all the stuff that I'd sent in ahead of time, which was phenomenal, because that so rarely happens. Now, it was because they were on a break, and he was home, and he was at his office down on Punch Bowl, and I was sitting at the house. But still, for him to actually read everything that I'd submitted ahead of time. Right. But I hadn't submitted, pages and pages and pages. Right. I think I submitted like a 3-page document that had like 5. Right. Yeah. And so you have to be ready for that and understand that. You always have to be ready to shift gears too. Because it's like, I went to visit him the year in, I guess it was 19, I went to visit him in Washington, and because he returned, he was a new guy. He's all the way at the back and upstairs.
Right. He's got the what do they call it, the nosebleeds, right?
He did, and so I was in his office, and we were literally walking into his inner office so that we could sit down and talk, when a chime went off. And he's like, "Oh!" and he stops and turns around, and he goes, "That's a call to the House floor for a vote." He goes, "Can can you walk and talk at the same time? I'm like, absolutely, sir. And so we took off at a pretty quick lope, which was really kind of cool because with me being with him, we got to blow through all the security and everything else.
Yeah.
But the thing I didn't tell him, and I told the staff there afterwards, I was 6 weeks out of knee replacement surgery. That was my second one because a couple months before that, I had the other knee done. Now they were both partial, so it wasn't quite as bad.
But you were humping along there that day, and
yeah. But opportunities to meet with members of Congress are not all that frequent, and so he had specific questions because of his connection to Parkinson. He wanted to ask me, and that he made me want to go with him to answer those, because how often do you get a member of Congress that's actually really engaged in your subject?
Right, really interested, asking actual, not just fluff questions. Oh, what'd you do? Hey, nice to meet you. But like, hey, tell me about this. What's your position? What's the best way we look at this?
Yeah, I had the same type of situation came up when I dealt with Senator Schatz at the same time. Not the same visit, a different visit. Because of where I was working and the level of the work I was doing down at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, I was given a award from the Secretary of Defense for workplace excellence by a person with disabilities. They brought 25 of us to the Pentagon to give us these awards out of the 2.5 million people in the Department of Defense.
Okay.
Just a phenomenal honor. And so while I was there, I contacted his office to say, hey, do you think the senator would have time to do a quick photo op? Because I asked him to come over for the presentation. Too busy, of course. Right. But then we worked it out to do a photo op. So I jumped over to the house. Since I'd been over there before, I knew how to get over and navigate. Right. And so, you hear about walking the halls and meeting on the walk or between meetings. They took me up, and I was standing outside the Indian Affairs Committee room because he was coming up to do a meeting on Indian Affairs. And he came up and they brought him over to talk to me. And I'm used to dealing with admirals and generals. Right. And the staff always hovers there to make sure they're on time and do whatever they need. But his staff, amazingly enough, backed off and left him one-on-one with me. And so I spent about three minutes talking to a senator.
Sure. Undivided attention, right.
Yeah, can be a long time. And I found out he has a personal connection as well to Parkinson's. And so he gave me his undivided attention. I talked very briefly about a couple of things we were doing. And we did the photo op and then off he went. But those opportunities, you have to be ready to take them when they come. And you can't be afraid to ask for them. Right. And because again, what's the worst that's going to happen? Say no. What's the best? I got this fantastic photo op. And because of stuff like that, because one of the hardest things is reaching out, getting our name known. And so I used every opportunity I have to get my name out there. My name and the organization's name. My name I could care less because it's all about getting the organization's name. We were very fortunate last fall that we had the cover of Midweek magazine. A friend of mine felt very strongly about the job I was doing, so he wrote a letter about me, called me his everyday hero. Then he shopped the letter around, tried paid publications first. They passed. We ended up with Midweek. And on reflection, it took me a very brief time to realize it was actually a phenomenal opportunity because Star Advertiser's circulation 65,000. Midweek's is 250,000.
They push that out to everybody.
Every home in the state.
That's right.
And so the coverage I got, and they were very, very generous when they did the article. We ended up with like 2.5 pages on the inside, plus the cover. Just this phenomenal amount of coverage for our organization. But the phone calls and emails we got after that was really good. It did what it did, but not as much as I expected. I wanted even more coverage because I estimate out of the 7,000 diagnosed patients, we're only engaged in one form or another between 25 and 30%. That means there's 60 or 70% that don't even probably know we exist to help them out.
Well, here on Hawaii Boss, we sadly this is all the time we have yet for today. But we're trying to. What is the best way? People want to know and last parting words for the folks out there.
The last thing I always leave everybody. Well, first of all, Resource Center. We're up on phones, emails, Zoom, in person.
Right here on the Lily Haw Street, the campus here, the St. Francis campus. Right.
We're located in a good place, but if you can't make it here, you can call us, you can email us. We mail out packages free of charge. Everything we do is free of charge. To get it to you, if I have to mail it to you, fine. If somebody knows you, we can drop it off. I mean, we'll do it any which way we have to get it there. But the biggest message I go back to, and I mentioned this at the very beginning for Parkinson patients, especially the newly diagnosed, is you're not alone. You're a brother and sister of mine. I'm always here for you. I'm always available by phone. I've given out literally thousands of my business cards, and people routinely call me at home
Right.
or at work, and I don't mind that because I remember what it was like being newly diagnosed and being alone, and it was not a fun feeling. And
Yeah, your family, you can't even hardly call your family. They don't understand it completely either.
correct. Well, nobody can understand it unless they actually have it.
Right.
And that's even people that have been around it for decades understand the most, but unless they have it, they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people that do have it, especially the newly diagnosed, when you're ready to talk, we're here for you.
Right.
We always want you to just get in touch with us. So that's the biggest message I always try to make sure everybody gets.
Well, Jerry Boster, this little bit of time that the Hawaii Boss crew has been able to stay with you, we all agree that definitely you're the man for this position. So
Thank you, and thanks for being here. Because if you haven't figured it out, I'd love to show this place off.
Sure.
It's been a labor of love, but it's also it's actually a really useful place. One last kind of interesting
Sure,
story.
yeah.
When you came through the reception area, did you notice something missing?
well, actually, no, I didn't.
There's no door to the inner sanctum.
Oh, okay.
Think about it when you're going to a doctor's office. You have that door that's very closed off.
Right.
And, this is your boundaries. This is where you'll stay.
Right. You're the patient. I'm the doctor.
Yeah. That's not the way we didn't want that. We wanted an opening, warm, welcoming feel. And so part of the reason we took the door off was so we get that feel. The other part was because it blocked half of our window. And
Get some light in here.
Well, we really had to tear the whole front wall
Right.
out to open that up.
Right.
Which costs way too much money. It was a whole lot easier just to take the door off and have them store it somewhere.
Right.
But the net effect is when people come in, they're always free to come wander back here. They don't have to be escorted. They
Right.
just come in. But we try to help. We talk to people to try to tailor the information they're getting. But it's all about being available so that we give people
Right.
what they need. So
they don't have to face this alone. And for that, Jerry, I think all the patients, I'm sure there's probably a good lineup out here and all the good things that, because of your efforts, the good things that have happened. So we look forward to seeing all the great stuff that's coming forward, getting that doctor on board and everything. So until next time, aloha.
aloha.
Make sure to subscribe to Hawaii Boss and follow us on social media at Hawaii Boss Podcast at the links in the description. We'll see you soon in the boss's office.